If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedman.
Welcome to the 400th episode of Book Marketing Mentors, the podcast that's all about helping nonfiction authors find the best way to market and sell their books. I can hardly believe it. I'm here celebrating this super significant milestone. September 15th, 2015 was the first ever episode of Book Marketing Mentors, where I interviewed the great John Kramer on practical ways to market your book. Looking back, those early episodes were a far cry from where the podcast is today. For starters, I've gotten so much more confident and relaxed about interviewing my guests, and I allow it to be a lot more fun. Little did I think that 8 years later, I'd still be sharing proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips on ways to market and sell your books. Let me let you into a little secret. I absolutely love exploring the fascinating world of numerology and the meanings behind numbers. While this may not be an exact science, the number 8 holds immense power. According to numerology, it represents discipline, patience, and persistence as a key to unlock one's full potential. I believe that it's taken discipline, patience, and persistence to produce this podcast week after week, month after month, and year after year. And then there's the number 400, which symbolizes hard work and determination. It's a constant reminder to keep pushing forward on the right path. And even though I've often thought of giving up, I've kept going thanks to so many of you, my loyal and dedicated listeners, who remind me of the value these episodes bring. I owe you all a boatload of gratitude for supporting me over the years and reminding me that this is worthwhile. This is a worthwhile contribution to the world of book and author marketing. So as I celebrate this 400th episode, it's fun to reflect on the journey that I've had over the last 8 years. 8 years ago, podcasts were still very much in their infancy, and there were far fewer podcasts to actually listen to. So let me talk to you about how I actually got started and my impetus for doing that. As you'll know by now, I have a great love for niche marketing, or niche marketing as I like to call it. And the idea of having a program solely aimed at authors, and particularly nonfiction authors, felt like a great fit and an extension to the Viva Publishing brand. When I started to explore the podcasting world, I discovered a course run by John Lee Dumas. He was producing Entrepreneurs on Fire every single day. That sounded exhausting to me. That podcast exploded and really put John on the podcast map as one of the top podcasts to listen to worldwide. So I decided to follow his methodology. And his suggestion was to put together at least a minimum of 6 episodes and have those ready to go before actually going live. I can recall how hard it was to pull the trigger on that first episode. John Melly, my podcast mentor in the beginning, challenged me to just do it. John, in fact, is the intro and the outro voice on each episode. At the time, he worked for one of the Boston radio stations, and now he's a full-time voiceover talent. The idea of actually going live scared the EBGBs out of me. I knew that I was making a huge commitment, especially if I was to do this consistently on a weekly basis. I was excited and scared at the same time. So as I mentioned earlier, September 15th, 2015 was the day it all started. And I've been consistently posting episodes every Wednesday for the past 8 years. The only time I missed a few weeks was when my father passed away and I spent several weeks in London clearing out his apartment and getting his affairs in order. I agonized. I worried that I hadn't prepared for this and that listeners would think that I'd somehow disappeared into the ether. The funny thing was that absolutely no one commented on my absence. So guess what? I just picked up where I left off and started up again. 8 years ago, when I did start the podcast, my mission was simple: to help authors market their books more effectively. Over the years, I've covered a wide range of topics, from social media strategies to book launches, from author branding to content marketing. And along the way, I've had the privilege of hosting some of the most brilliant minds in the industry. Each one of my guests have generously shared their unique wisdom and expertise. My guests have been at the heart and soul of this podcast, and I want to express my deepest gratitude to each and every one of them. Without their wisdom and generosity, I would never have reached this significant milestone. Oh, and I mustn't forget to mention that in 2018, Smart Blogger voted Book Marketing Mentors as one of the top book marketing podcasts in the world. Wow, that was truly a great feeling to have the podcast acknowledged in that way. But like with every experience, we make mistakes and learn from our mistakes. I thought it would be fun to share some of the blunders I've made over the years that have helped to improve my interviewing and presentation skills. First on the list of blunders is that dreaded lack of preparation. We've all been there in some form or other. For me, those moments have been when I'm about to introduce my guest and realized that I'd forgotten to ask the correct way to pronounce their name. Or perhaps I'd forgotten to share that I always end my interview by asking a guest to share a golden nugget. I hate to spring this on my guests without them being prepared, because it can often lead to that uncomfortable silence or a series of ums and ahs as they think about something to say. Alternatively, they might share one thing and then think about something else that they would prefer to say. Now, I always want my guests to feel comfortable and enjoy their interview. However, in the process, I also try and help keep editing down to a minimum. Also, if I'd been prepared with a list of questions and guidelines, I would have discussed this in more detail with the guest before the show. So what was my solution? Definitely make sure that I do my homework correctly, research the guest, and know the topic they're going to discuss. And of course, go over a few questions and guidelines before I press the record button to let that magic happen. Yes, each interview has its piece of magic, because as much as I can be prepared for how I'd like the interview to go, I never know exactly what my guest is going to say. And I really like to, if I can, springboard off of something they might have said, which will take us in another direction and make the interview maybe a little more interesting, spice it up a little bit. So, as I said, I just never know where that magic is going to happen. Another aspect of this lack of preparation is to make sure that my guest has all their notifications turned off and their phone put on silent mode. It's irritating, to say the least, when we're in the middle of a great conversation and then suddenly there's a beep, a bell, a buzz, or some kind of notification sound, or their phone rings. It can throw me for a loop. And of course, it's often tough to edit out because it might overlap with something that was being said at the time. My editor can and does perform miracles for me, but there's only so much that she and technology can do. A side note, Evelyn has worked with me ever since the beginning, and she is amazing. She's one of my special Fiverr finds, and I plan to hang on to her till either she or I decide to quit, which, as far as I'm concerned, is definitely not in the near future. Oh, and if I hadn't prepared the direction I'd like the interview to go, there have been times where I've had to backpedal because the guest has given me, those one-sentence answers to my questions. And what happens is I run out of steam and I need to ask the guest, well, where should we go with the conversation? The best kind of guest is one who you ask an open question, they're going to answer it, and they're going to maybe share an example or a story or their own experience. But when they just give me one sentence or even one word, then it starts becoming like an interrogation, which is absolutely the opposite of what you want in a podcast interview, or in fact, in any interview, unless, of course, you're doing an interrogation. Let's move on to blunder number 2, and that's poor audio quality. Now, let's talk about the sin of poor audio quality. When it sounds like you're recording from inside a tin can, or perhaps even in a football stadium with the guest at one end and me at the other, it's terrible. In the beginning, I was actually afraid to mention anything about the quality of my guest's audio. Even that first audio interview that I did with John, his audio quality was really poor. And if I listen to that interview, it's really hard because I wanted it to be such a great interview and it wasn't as good as I'd wanted it to be. It was first one, I went with it, and everything has hopefully gotten a lot better since then. Of course, now I do make a point of making sure that I am completely satisfied with the quality of my guest's mic. Now, it doesn't have to be an expensive mic. It just has to be clear without that background noise, without it sounding as if you're speaking in a tunnel or a can or whatever. The last thing I want is for you, the listener, to struggle listening. And obviously, the possibility of you tuning out faster, then of course you can say technical difficulties. And of course, there are technical difficulties, but you want to keep those to a minimum. I think that audiences overall are very forgiving. But of course, neither I nor you would want to listen to poor audio for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes or more. So then this leads me to another blunder, and that's overlooking technical checks. Now, overlooking technical checks is like setting sail without checking the weather forecast. And anybody who's done any sailing knows that that is contrary to what you need to be doing. I'll let you into another little secret, and that is there have been a few times when the table was turned in my direction. My mic might have played up because I'd forgotten to do a mic check beforehand. And what this did was to make my segment so bad that I had the option to either ask the guest to re-record the interview or to redo my segment. And I've done both. But when I've opted to do my segment over again, that's super time consuming, super frustrating, and I rely on Evelyn, my editor, to stitch everything into their right position and make the whole interview sound seamless. She's genius at this. And as I said, this is one of those things that I absolutely hate to have to do. And I can count on one hand, thank goodness, how many times I've had to do it. And I would prefer not to in the future. There's an aspect of that too that's frustrating. And that is if my guests don't mention the fact that my mic sounds bad, if I'm making sure theirs sounds good, but in return, they're not telling me that mine doesn't sound the best. So, of course, now I make a point of asking them, how does my mic sound? And obviously making sure that I'm satisfied with how their mic sounds. And of course, I highly recommend a quick tech check before starting the recording. And that leads me to the few horrific and embarrassing times I've spent 25 or 30 minutes interviewing my guests only to realize, you've guessed it, I'd forgotten to press the record button. All I can say is thank goodness for understanding guests, and no comment. I'll leave it all at that. I know there are many more things I've learned over the years, but I'll leave those for another milestone anniversary. So keep listening. Now let's chat about some exciting news that I want to share with you. In celebration of our 400th anniversary, we've revamped our branding, and you'll now find the new visual identity across our website, social media, and all the podcast platforms. It's a reflection of our commitment to evolving and growing as we continue this incredible podcast journey. And my plan moving forward is to continue to interview more experts to provide you with valuable insights and strategies to help you market and sell more of your nonfiction books. And of course, I know many of you said to do more episodes with me, and I'm going to be doing that too. So now on a different note, as we start closing up 2023, I thought it would be valuable to share a few key strategies and trends in book marketing that I invite you to keep an eye on in the coming year. You've probably noticed that the nonfiction book market is getting more and more overcrowded. And with the rise of self-publishing, digital platforms, and accessible publishing tools, anyone with knowledge and a story to share can easily become an author. While this ease into the publishing world is exciting, the challenges are that it's getting harder and harder to stand out in a really crowded marketplace. The big question is, how can you rise above the noise and establish a unique presence for yourself? You've heard me say this before, but first and foremost, it's all about identifying your target, or even better, your niche audience. As many of you know, this is by far and away my all-time favorite subject, especially since I wrote the best-selling book, Riches in Niches, How to Make It Big in a Small Market, as well as The Complete Idiot's Guide to Target Marketing. So as you can imagine, I could spend many hours just talking about this subject. The whole premise of target marketing is the idea of marketing more efficiently and more effectively. But what does that really mean? In essence, it's about prioritizing what's important and then having a clear strategy to keep working the plan. I'll use myself as an example. My intention for starting this podcast was to share valuable strategies, tools, tips, and ideas to help nonfiction authors with their book and author marketing. I knew I couldn't do this all by myself. So by interviewing experts and tapping into their expertise, it was a far better way for me to accomplish the strategy. I view this as one of my key marketing strategies. It allows me to show other people's wisdom and expertise, as well as build ongoing colleague relationships. In essence, it's a two-pronged plan. And most importantly, it's one I really enjoy doing. It's fun for me to interview both friends and colleagues and people I just meet right before the interview. This is my biggest and most successful marketing strategy. Just because I like to do it and use this strategy, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you. However, it might be. And I'd be happy to chat with you about it if it's something that you want to consider doing. Some of you like social media marketing. That's not my jam. In fact, it's not something I enjoy doing, and as a result, I do very little of it, despite the fact many of my colleagues swear by it. It works for them because it's one of the strategies they use, and they use consistently, which is key, by the way, with any strategy you decide to use. Make sure that you can do it consistently, whether it's content marketing, blog writing, posting on social media, whatever target market strategy you use, just make sure you enjoy doing it and never feel that it's something that you should do. Rather, it's something that you want to do. Because it's easy to fall into a trap of colleagues telling you that you should do this and you should do that. You need to do what's right for you and the market who you are looking to work with, or that you do work with currently. Since I'm on the target marketing tangent, one of the biggest mistakes I see authors make is to target a market that's far too big. Or better still, they're frightened to make their market too small. Let's say the topic of your book is stress management, and you feel that it would be a good fit for women between the ages of 35 and 55. This is a huge market. A woman of 35 is in a whole different phase of her life and would have different stresses than a woman in her mid-50s. Are these professional women, or are they stay-at-home moms? Do they have toddlers, or are they empty nesters? And of course, I can go on with the differences between women with a 20-year age gap. Even if your book would be a right fit for these women, their life situation is likely to be very different, and so marketing to them would be far harder than if you pick a smaller market. For example, professional women in their 40s working in healthcare in the Chicago area. This could and probably is still a big market, but at least it's one that you could wrap your arms around and be more efficient and more effective in your marketing strategy or strategies. Remember, if you want to brainstorm some of your marketing ideas or have me help you find a good niche or target market for yourself, I offer a 20-minute complimentary brainstorming session. Go to brainstormwithsusan.com to book your session. Another trend that's continuing to grow in popularity are audiobooks. The reason audiobooks are so popular in the nonfiction market is because they're super convenient for busy folks. It's also a dynamic way to offer and deliver educational and instructional content. Listening to a book engages different senses and immerses you in the experience. But producing a nonfiction book as an audiobook can be a game changer for authors because it opens a door to a wider audience. It increases accessibility and creates exciting new opportunities for engagement and, listen to this, revenue. Audiobooks can reach more people, including those people who prefer listening rather than the traditional reading, or if you want to listen to them while you're doing other stuff. Personally, I absolutely love audiobooks because I can enjoy listening to them on long car rides or when I'm cooking dinner. And then if you decide to narrate your own book, it gives you the opportunity to establish an intimate connection with your audience. However, this isn't for everyone, because if you're not used to recording audio, it can take a really long time to read a 200+ page book. That's probably best to leave to the professionals. However, There's no harm in adding a personally recorded message at either both the beginning or at the end of the recording. One fear that I hear from authors is that if there's an audio version of the book, that means that people won't buy the printed version. It's really funny, but readers often like a book in multiple formats. If a book is chock full of useful information, I personally will buy the printed copy and or the ebook so that I can easily refer back to the information. So don't be frightened of audiobooks. Look and see if it's right for your target audience. And of course, you've got other versions of the book as well, and not everybody fits the same mold. Some people like the tangible book. Some people like the ebook and the convenience of that. And then some people like the audio version. I like all three. So do your research, find out what your target audience prefers. The final strategy I'll leave you with today is podcast guesting. This is currently one of the most powerful marketing strategies. Guesting on podcasts is an absolute game changer. It's like grabbing a cup of coffee with thousands of potential new fans. And that's what I always tell my guests. I want to have a conversation with them as if we're sitting down by the fireside, drinking a cup of tea or coffee together. Imagine you sharing your expertise, passions, and funny stories directly with your listeners. It's the ultimate way to connect. Podcasts are the coolest trend in the digital world, reaching diverse audiences who crave authenticity. Being a guest isn't just an interview. It's a chance for you to build trust and credibility with your target audience. You're not just a voice. You're a friend that listeners invite into their daily routines. It's marketing, but without the pushy sales tactics. And I know some of you like to hear that. Instead, you get to create genuine relationships and leave a lasting impression on the podcast universe. Podcasts last a long time. You can go back and listen to all 400 of my episodes if you really wanted to, especially if you've got a lot of spare time on your hands. Guesting is all about making marketing personal. Why not check it out? And again, I'm happy to chat with you about ways to get invited as a podcast guest. Schedule a 20-minute complimentary session with me at brainstormwithsusan.com. So as we wrap up this special 400th episode, I want to once again express my gratitude to you all, my listeners, who've tuned in episode after episode. Your support and feedback and enthusiasm have been a constant source of inspiration, especially, as I said, on those times when I'm like, oh, I want to give this up, but you encourage me to keep going. And that's really wonderful. So thank you. A big thank you again to my guests, sponsors, Evelyn, my editor, and everyone who's been part of this incredible journey. It's thanks to you that I'm here today celebrating this remarkable milestone. Thank you for joining me for this special episode of Book Marketing Mentors. And here's to the next 400 episodes of learning, sharing, and growing together. Until next week, here's wishing you much book and author marketing success.